Hey, thank you for stopping by, Brian for Liberty. I am here today to talk about what I am calling, and this is going to be a little video series of mine called Freedom Agenda 2024. And this is going to be me talking about issues that I think should be at the top of people's lists moving into the election season, because we all know what's happening. You can see it already over the last year or so. It's more and more about what's going on in the culture war than it is about actual issues to improve our lives. And the reason for that is pretty simple. People who are already in power, people who are already wealthy, people who have already been elected, people who are already in positions of influence, they benefit very, very greatly from the status quo. And these problems have been with us for a long, long time because people in power don't want to change the status quo. Why would you? You're benefiting from a system that exists already. So as election season starts heating up, the distractions start coming out so we can argue about things and fight about things that aren't necessarily that important and divert ourselves from the actual and be distracted away from the actual issues that we should be discussing and the changes that we should be demanding from our politicians. So I'm here in South Carolina, and as part of this series, I'm also going to be going through South Carolina politicians specifically. Now I'm going to hang on to those and probably do those at the end of my upcoming videos so that those of you who don't live in this state can kind of tune out before the end. But I do want to talk about that for South Carolina, for where I'm at. And what I want to do is give a nice little synopsis of what these who these candidates are, what they stand for, and then maybe give you a blueprint for how you can do that in your own state with your own political candidates and start getting information, putting together your own little, let's call it a dossier on politicians, both the candidates and the incumbents, so that you have an idea rolling into the election of who you want to vote for and what issues are going to be important to you, and share that with your friends, share that with your neighbors, so that you have if you can make an impact and take a few voters and make them a little bit better informed, that's a step in the right direction. But I'm going to get right into some of the issues here that I think are really critical in 2024. And at the top of my list is going to be school choice. You cannot continue to turn the nation's children over to state-run schools and expect them to be anything but drones cranked out by our education system. It is a broken, monopolistic system. It has failed in virtually every measurable way. It has done nothing but produce worse results since the inception of the Federal Department of Education. These curriculums are being pushed down into the states from on high. And at the end of the day, parents need to have control over their child's education. Those educational dollars need to be in the hands of parents, not in the hands of institutions, so that parents can make decisions about where the children are going to be educated. And at the end of the day, you aren't going to change the course of history. I mean, you're really talking about big things here. When you're talking about education and you're talking about children being stuck in government schools, you're really talking about controlling the future. And right now, the future is in the hands of the state, and I want the future in the hands of the people. And in order for that to happen, you have to take the power to educate the future generation out of the hands of the state and return it to the hands of the parents. So I definitely think that school choice is at the very, very top of my list. The arguments you're going to hear opposing this predominantly are going to be the threat that it poses to public education, and that's fine. I do not care about public education, and I want you to bear this in mind as you have conversations. If you have conversations with people about school choice, I want you to bear in mind that very few of the people who are arguing against school choice are going to bring up academic standards to you. They're only going to talk about the threat that it is to public education. They're not actually going to talk about educational standards because they don't have a leg to stand on. Public schools have scored incredibly poorly. There's not another business you would engage in, or engage with, I should say. There's not another business you would engage with, okay, if they were performing as poorly as our public schools are right now. You would not bring your money by choice to a business that's performing as poorly as public schools are. And that's why taxation is a theft, and it's a horrible thing because we are forced to pay for something we would never pay for on our own. That's not to say we wouldn't pay for our children's education, but we would certainly seek out better alternatives to the public school system. The second issue is healthcare. I think healthcare is a great and divisive issue for politicians, because we talk a lot about Medicare and Medicaid and universal health care and Medicare for all and all these different issues. The fact of the matter is and here's the interesting thing about the healthcare argument is we are never going to have universal healthcare. It's never going to happen. So we keep having this fight over universal healthcare, but it's never going to happen. It's never going to be a thing that we get here. Hopefully, my lips to God's ears, I guess. But hopefully we never end up with some kind of a universal government-controlled healthcare system. But what we do need to do is what the left does very well is find genuine things to complain about in the current system. And our healthcare system is absolutely broken. It's not a question. It's inarguable. There's no way healthcare should cost as much as it does. But once they've identified that healthcare is way too expensive, they blame the wrong thing. What they blame is the market, and they blame capitalism, and they blame profits. And that's not what the issue is with healthcare. The issue with healthcare is that it's not a market-based system. It's so heavily and over-regulated. It prevents competition. So here in South Carolina and in 35 other states, I've done a video on this topic specifically. But in South Carolina, as well as 35 other states, we have what's called certificate of need laws. These are a set of rules and regulations built specifically around the idea that competition in healthcare is a bad thing. That's the literal, if you read certificate of need laws and why they exist, and you simplify the language in their justifications, what you're going to find is simply these rules and regulations are based on the premise that competition is a bad thing. And so that's why you end up with if you look around your own state, here in South Carolina, we have, where I live anyway, Prisma Health is kind of at the top of the totem pole. And I couldn't name another big healthcare provider in my area. I came here from Wisconsin. We had a couple, but Mayo Clinic was kind of really big in that area, and Luther hospitals were big in that area. So what you'll find is you have one or two large healthcare providers. They make a ton of money. And with certificate of need laws, in order to come in and establish or provide competition or alternatives to the big providers that already exist, they literally have to go to those big providers, essentially, and ask them for permission to do business. I always say it's kind of like McDonald's and Burger King deciding whether or not it's okay for a Wendy's to open. That's kind of how certificate of need laws work. The other side of this is, of course, and this is more of a federal issue, unfortunately, so it's a little bit harder to deal with at the state level. But another issue is, of course, healthcare insurance and the inability for healthcare insurance to be priced competitively. There's a lot of regulations that stand in the way. I want you to think about it like this. If you, at your employer, I'm 47 years old and I'm in pretty good shape. I just ran my third marathon. I try and take pretty decent care of myself. But I used to be a smoker, I'm not anymore. But if you're a smoker, you pay more. But let me ask you that: if you're a healthy 25-year-old, and I'm in your office and I'm an unhealthy 50-year-old, I drink heavy, I'm overweight, I don't exercise, I'm 50 years old, and you're a healthy 25-year-old, why is it that you and I pay the same amount for health insurance? If I'm older and I'm in poorer shape and I'm a higher risk, shouldn't I be paying more? And the interesting thing is how regressive that is in nature, because as an older person in the workplace, I probably make more money than the younger people in my workplace. So the young people in my workplace are actually subsidizing the older people who are probably making more money because they're paying the same premium, even though one is a significantly higher risk. And I always think, equate that to car insurance. When you look at car insurance, you'd say young people pay more, and as they age, statistically, their risk factors fall, and therefore their premiums go down. If that's exactly how it should work. And we allow car insurance to price risk, but we don't allow health insurance to do that. And there's a myriad of other regulations that make health insurance more expensive than it would otherwise need to be. But at the bottom line is healthcare needs to be cheaper. And in order for healthcare to be cheaper, it needs to be exposed to a competitive environment. And if you live in one of the many states that have certificate of need laws, like I do here in South Carolina, then that's definitely something that's at the top of the list. I'm going to turn the page here. I got some other things written down. The war on drugs. Ending the war on drugs is always a top issue. And I know that because libertarians talk about the war on drugs and ending the war on drugs, we get this reputation as a group of people who just we're just Republicans who want to smoke pot, or whatever the case may be, whatever kind of silly things people say about libertarians out there. But the reason we want to end the war on drugs is because it's a massive misallocation of resources. Now, I'm going to do individual videos on each one of these topics. So subscribe to the channel, like this content, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications. I'm going to go through each one of these issues more in depth, but I'm going to touch briefly on them all here. With the war on drugs, it's a massive misallocation of resources. Why? I don't know what the specific number is. Specific? I don't know what the specific number is, but I know that in South Carolina, I think we have something like 33,000 untested rape kits. So it's an insane number. 1,000 is too many, but it's a massive number. And law enforcement resources, like every resource, is a limited commodity. There's only so much law enforcement resource to go around. I want my law enforcement investigating violent crime, tracking down criminals, testing. I don't want them pulling somebody over and wasting their time searching a car so they can hopefully find some marijuana so they can get a charge against somebody. I don't care that somebody's getting high. I want to investigate violent crime. I want police to be able to be stationed outside of our schools, all of our schools. We're already paying for security. They're called police, and they should be at our schools during the day, not roaming the streets trying to raise revenue through traffic tickets and pull people over to find charges on marijuana. We need to end the war on drugs so we can allocate and prioritize our law enforcement resources. On top of that, I think we need prison reform. I don't think we need it. I know we need prison reform. And what I would say is that prisons need to be, this is another allocation of resources, but this is also something that comes back to pay the taxpayer back. Prisons need to be designed by mental health professionals, and they need to be places where we are sending criminals, where we are sending people with antisocial behavioral issues to rehabilitate these people and make them productive tax-paying citizens. The idea that prison needs to be a punishment is perfectly fine, but I want everybody to think back to 2020 and recognize that no matter how comfortable your prison is, it's still a punishment to be stuck there. Taking away a person's freedom and putting them in a building that they're not allowed to leave is the punishment. But while they're there, how do we want to allocate our tax dollars? And I would like to allocate my tax dollars rehabilitating these people so that when they do get out of prison, they aren't reoffending. And that's going to save taxpayers money in the long run, but it's also the right and moral thing to do. We treat our prisoners like animals. We shouldn't be using prisoners as a cheap labor. We shouldn't be. The idea of how we treat our prisoners, it's just horrible. And really, you're setting these people up. You're taking nonviolent offenders. You're taking petty criminals, and you're turning them into career criminals because you're putting them in an environment that's so bad that really the odds of them repeating are incredibly high. We don't want our prisons to be revolving doors, but in order to end that you have to fix the prisons and you have to fix your idea of what a prison is supposed to be. Those are some of my top issues rolling into 2024. That is not it. I'm going to have more issues coming up. And like I said, I'm also going to be starting to take a closer look at some of the incumbents first, and then as the candidates start kind of announcing and we start getting a breakdown of who's going to be running amongst the different parties, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But I wanted to get this video out first because I'm kind of setting myself up for that series, setting you all up for that series where we are really going to start zeroing in on issues that matter and preparing ourselves to be educated, intelligent voters so that we can go out and have valuable conversations with other people about politics, about these issues, so that we can slowly and hopefully turn the tide, and you have better voters, you will have better politicians. So once again, thanks for coming by. Please, again, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so that you can be part of this series of videos, and I will see you all next time.